the break there, Steve mentioned we're only talking about 8 games a year. How many games are we talking about a year?
10, inclink the preseason.
You're only talking
if they would ever make the playoffs.
Well, okay, so
12 in '99 and 2001.
So if we keep the current team 10 games a year, with the new team will do better. I'm not going to be allowed to go back to when the Rams are good, they won't let me in. Is that something we should be considering? This is only 10 games a year plus playoffs?
Yeah, but like I say, St. Louis especially, 10 dates, 11 dates, whatever, it makes a lot of difference in the city of St. Louis. It's a city that I think is on the uprise, but we don't want to plateau. We don't want to go backward. And to lose something that you already have, you made an excellent point. You never want to go backwards. You don't want to be last, and you don't want to lose what you have. Those two things are very important to progress, and we don't want to go backwards.
And I go back to the ancillary things that I talked about. It's, to me, and I think for a lot of people, this is more than just an economic issue. I go out and about during the course of the season, and everywhere I go, even when the Rams are bad, people say, what do you think about this with the Rams? What do you think about that with the Rams? This is something that is part of the fabric of a community when you have an NFL team. And I think that's something that we have to keep in mind too. It's not just dollars and cents. It's not just numbers and decimal points. There's more to it. It's really part of the fabric of who we are.
So you're a sports guy, but you're also the guy who rode Metro to work, you told us. Yeah. Is there a responsibility, if not maybe on the shoulders of the average fan, but of our leaders, to take into consideration some of these other things we're talking about in terms of our built environment and our history and access and all these other things?
Without question. And if I'm of the belief, Alvin and I were just talking about this, if there are people out there to redevelop these buildings that have been sitting vacant for years and years, that's great. I hope we can find them. I think that'd be wonderful. But, and yes, there is a responsibility on the part of our leadership to make sure that they're doing things right. But at the same time, if we extend the bonds, then nobody is going to feel the tax pinch any more than they were feeling it yesterday. It's going to be identical to what it was. And that's the way I'm looking at it. I'm looking at it like refinancing a house. And ultimately, if you can do better, if you can make your community better, and I think an NFL team makes us better, I think you should do what you can to make it better.
I think that for sure having an NFL team in St. Louis does make the city better, but I do think that there's also an economic component there as well. You look at, there's a wide spectrum of dollars in terms of not having the Rams in St. Louis and what that would mean. The regional chamber, when they lured or when they got the Rams to St. Louis in 1995, put a number on it of between $100 and $150 million. Now that's higher than what it actually is. The regional chamber doesn't have an estimate for the economic impact right now. The closest thing we can gauge with is the Baltimore Ravens. Maryland did a study in 2011 when the NFL was going through the lockout. And they said had the season gone to waste and the NFL wouldn't have played, the local economies would have lost out on about $2 to $3 million. Now we're talking gas, hotels, stuff like that. The state would have lost out on more in terms of tax dollars and things of that nature. But it remains to be seen. The economic impact is not that big.
Should we vote on it? Are we going to vote on it? Randy mentioned extending the bonds, talking about the payments that would normally have been done, I believe, 2021 on the dome. The state's paying $12 million, the city and the county $6 million each, I believe, is what it is. So there's a lot going on in Jeff City. There's a quote every day in the paper. You're writing about it,
and there's a lot going on there in terms of people saying that we can get by without having a vote, and then there's plenty of people saying we do need to have a vote, and that still needs to be played out right now. I do know that I've talked to some people that advise the county, and they said they could extend those bonds without getting to a vote. Now, whether or not they'll do that remains to be seen.
Well, that's where politicians come in. You extend those bonds without a vote of the people. Whoever is in office right now will not be in office shortly thereafter. So that would be they would have to make that literally the sacrifice to do so. I think there should be a vote on it because the people voted in both the county and the city that if you were ever going to use tax dollars for a new stadium, there should be a vote on it. You can get around that. But at the same time, it's another whole show, but this is where referendums come into, listen, hey, we created this situation, so you got to let the people vote.
Well, we have a politician that won't be in office. He's the governor. He's done that for 2016.
Well, we have one in this office right now who I'm waiting to hear from, and that's the mayor of the city of St. Louis. I'm waiting for a comment from him because this is all supposed to happen in the city of St. Louis.
Well, and this is an opportunity for St. Louis to have a conversation about what we want the future of our city to be, whether, once again, it's an NFL team or it's a stadium or it's an investment in MetroLink. And I think those conversations need to be had. And putting it out to vote just allows, I don't know, more involvement. And that's a really important part of this is no longer should things happen without everybody thinking about the consequences of 10 or 20 years in the future. We really need to be careful about where we're pushing our city forward and what we want other people to think of us.
I think one of the major pluses that hasn't been mentioned yet is the fact that whether or not the Rams stay in St. Louis, they're going to be out of the dome. And that opens up the convention center to a lot more business. I think Dave Peacock said $20 million a year that could potentially add. Now, you talk to restaurant owners and hotel owners, and they'll say that a convention is just as good as a football game in terms of getting business.
And they can't, if I understand, the NFL scheduling is such that they can't book in advance the way conventions would
Right.
like to.
No, that's correct.
Yeah, so it sits dormant for the entire football season, that part of the convention center. So it will open us up to a lot of other opportunities there. The other thing to keep in mind is it's not just 10 football games a year, 12 if they have a good year. But
Listen, I can't get 12 dates a year. So.
but soccer is an opportunity too, and I don't think. I
Yes.
mean, we should not overlook that. I mean, think about what St. Louis did and how we rallied around World Cup and how we rallied around the 2 games that we had last year. I mean, that was an amazing showing, and it's really like kind of a grassroots thing in St. Louis already. So I think there's that opportunity as well, that beautiful facility that's been proposed could be used for other things too.
One caveat, if the league were to tell Stan Kroenke, you can't move, you have to stay in St. Louis, he will not build a new stadium. They will be playing in the Edward Jones Dome. Until
We're only going to do what we have to do? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, he would just say, like, I am not coughing up $250, $400 million, and I don't want to be here.
2021. We
Yeah,
could be back
but-
here at this same date next year
Exactly,
discussing the same thing.
exactly. They would just keep extending the lease. He would not build a new stadium.
Okay, I tell you what, you brought up soccer. Let's talk about soccer, but let's do it online because we're just about out of time on the air. Thanks to all of you for all your time. We appreciate it. We'll hang around for just 1 minute. Staytuned.9net.org, and you can find us online. We will talk soccer. We will also talk, let's see, big projects that solve all of our problems that Michael Allen mentioned. Downtown has developed over a long period of time. This wasn't a magic bullet that changed things there.
Right.
So we've got some things to discuss there. We'll find out what you're saying. We'll incorporate that, and we'll see you online in just a minute. Okay, so soccer, this beautiful stadium, to use your words, has a soccer configuration. We're also getting the U.S. women's national team in Busch Stadium here, I believe, before the season starts.
Correct.
So yeah, we've done pretty well. Is there a realistic chance that we might see soccer? Is that something that is part of this?
The MLS commissioner is coming to St. Louis, if not in the next couple weeks, definitely in the next month or so. He's stated his intentions to have an expansion team in St. Louis. He said before that the MLS doesn't make sense as a larger league without a team in St. Louis.
And the idea when you were going to build it in Collinsville or a place like that didn't work out. I think they want it in the urban core, wherever that may be. Certainly, if you build this stadium, you're going to have the soccer team with it to fill some of those dates, and that's what it would be necessary, I think, for the plan to even go. If the MSL, just said, like, we are not expanding anymore, there will not be a franchise in St. Louis, I think that would be a major blow to the entire stadium project.
Any soccer experts at the table, raise your hand, but do they want a stadium that large to put 30,000 people in, or do they want?
Yeah, the lower bowl. They don't want to
It's a
fill
lower
up.
bowl.
That's
Yeah, the
fine.
lower
They're
bowl.
okay with the top.
Yeah, the top
that works
end.
for TV or whatever. Because I know
Yeah.
Kansas City's is much smaller, and it's wildly successful.
If they had their choice, they would choose a smaller
20,000
European-style
seats in
stadium.
that
There's
area.
no
They do
question
the
about
Same
that.
thing in other markets.
But
where
it's
they
been
play
successful in other
Yeah.
places like Seattle.
And you could theoretically host, World Cup preliminary games, things like that, where you could play in Busch Stadium. The field itself is jammed in there so much that, when it literally is like the World Cup qualifying, things like that, then if it's a friendly, you can do it there. But for real, FIFA game, they probably would not want to play in Busch Stadium. You would need a larger
I
facility.
thought it was FIFA. That's how much I know.
You're probably right.
Am I?
Yeah. And if it's a FIFA game, you've got a little controller.
Does our love for controller and youth soccer, 'cause we're crazy about youth soccer, no doubt. I have a cousin that every time I go to her house, she has the soccer on satellite. Do we use satellite still for that stuff? But you know what I mean. The international games are on. But does that love for youth soccer, will that really translate to a major league team, do you think?
For many years, St. Louis was considered the soccer capital of the United States. There was one year where SIU Edwardsville, UMSL, and SLU all won the national championships in their respective divisions. So St. Louis had the Division 1, 2, and 3 national champions in soccer. We still turn out tons of soccer players, and there is still a big and hardcore soccer fandom here. I hear about them because I'm not a big soccer fan, so I hear about them a lot. And I think that that group is, first of all, very active. If this ever did come to a vote and Don Garber would guarantee an MLS franchise for St. Louis, I think that's a group to mobilize, to get to vote. And I think that that's a group that is well-heeled enough that they could buy season tickets and make MLS work here in St. Louis.
Right. Well, and I wouldn't want to stereotype, but some of the younger talent related to tech that we're trying to attract to St. Louis might be more interested in a soccer team than a football team.
No question.
No question, no question. And I sat in Busch Stadium in a sleet storm and watched SLU lose to Howard 1-0, and the place was pretty much packed. And I was, just in the early teens at that time, but I still remember that. And we're still out there. We were trying
to attract you then.
At that time, right. But no, seriously, if it were there and there was a big-time soccer game there, a lot of people who don't normally go to soccer games, me included, we'd be there. Remember the Steamers? I used to go see some Steamers games. I was in college. We'd come back, go see them. Place would be packed.
I have committed to buying season tickets for a soccer team if we get the stadium built. If the soccer fans help get this stadium built, I've committed to not only buying the season tickets, but wearing a scarf to the games.
What if we're not an NFL city? Could we do a smaller a soccer stadium without NFL?
That's conceivable. I don't know that Dave Peacock and Bob Blitz are working towards that, but certainly if you're not an NFL city, this could be an MLS city. I don't think there's any question about that.
Absolutely. Yeah, ask Tom Stillman, who owns the Blues. He said, hey, maybe seemed like a pipe dream right now, but boy, he would sure love to have a basketball team in that facility to fill his dates and help him out and get the Blues stronger. So, it's not the end of the world if the Rams leave, but don't get me wrong, it would be a setback.
So become better at what you're already good at is kind of the theme of something that I think a couple of you guys were saying.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And focus on your strengths.
And we can. I think that's the biggest issue is I think there's a lot of belief, and our town has been beaten down, like Missy was talking about earlier. Over the course of the last 6, 8, 10 months, we've been beaten down, and certainly by the Rams, we've been beaten down. But I think the thing that we need to keep in mind as a community is for a long time, Jack Buck and Robert Hyland, who ran KMOX, we all remember Jack, they talked about how St. Louis was the best kept secret in America. And I think there's a lot of people that are happy with the secret part, but not the best part. We can be great. We can be as good as anybody. And I think that's the attitude that we need to take. We need to be really positive and feel good about ourselves in St. Louis because we can be.
Right. I lived on the East Coast when it happened. And I had people around where I worked at USA Today at the time, and when they were going to announce the second expansion franchise, it's like, guys, listen, because we're about to get a football team back. And when they said the Jacksonville Jaguars, I was crushed. And I didn't live here, and I'm a lifelong Dallas Cowboy fan, still am to this day. And I was crushed. I hurt.
Deflated.
Deflated, very good. And I felt bad for the region. I felt bad for the city. I felt bad for the region. There are people that don't live here anymore, live and die on every Cardinal baseball game. I was one of those too. So it's not just here. It's all around the country that people are looking back and saying, we want the best for St. Louis, even though we don't live here anymore.
And on that day that happened, I got on an airplane with Jim Holder. We were covering that day for KMOX, and he was sitting in one seat, I sat in the other, and I said, our only chance is to get the Rams. And lo and behold, we wound up getting him. And I'd hate to be in that situation again, where you lose out on an opportunity and you're sitting saying, well, our only chance is the Raiders. we're better off, like I said earlier, keeping and doing everything we can to keep what we have rather than gamble that there might be somebody else coming.
Well, it's also a cautionary tale as well. You know, we lose out on the expansion teams. We made a somewhat unfortunate deal with the Rams, and now we're here talking about whether or not they're going to be going year to year or they're going to be leaving for LA.
Yeah,
particularly the top 25% clause.
Yeah, it all comes back to that lease. If it wasn't for that lease, we would not be having this discussion right now.
Which, and we'll wrap on this, but just kind of goes back to what you're saying. There is a limit to what we should do.
Yeah.
And that we may have crossed that line.
Well, you can't do what we did before. You can't spend you can't even do right now what Indianapolis did. They have a $720 million stadium, and the public funding is about $650 million. You can't go that far. In Atlanta, public funding is about 20%. In Minneapolis, it's about 50%. That's what you're dealing with now. The typical NFL stadium, if it's not completely funded by the owner, has 20 to 30% public funding, and that's obviously what we're looking at here.
I think we're going for the safe play. We're trying to get the NFL to put some money in, whether it's $100, $200 million. They have skin in the game, so we're not, banking on the Rams staying here. We're banking on the NFL putting money in and making sure that they feel committed to St. Louis.
Right,
And they are committed with that
They
G4
are,
fund.
but that's also a loan that somebody's got to pay
Right,
back.
sure.
And that's the owner, and right now I don't see him
And I think
paying
the
back a loan.
proposal that's been presented so far is strictly to get the NFL's interest. And that's where, the discussion earlier about how it could fit into this area in a better way or perhaps another spot in the region. I mean, they really think that this is the best way to get the NFL to invest here. That doesn't mean that it couldn't be done in a way that helps St. Louis more, helps downtown more, makes our riverfront even better. And I think that's what we've got to do to, we can't just do exactly what the NFL wants. We do what we get close, but we also want to create some other great amenities for other people in the region who may not go to a football game. And the stadium should be programmed so it can hold soccer, but also a lot of other events.
Oh, yeah, you're right. The footprint that is there now is a football stadium with parking lot around it. That's got to change. I mean, because that won't stand up to what, Crockett wants to do in Inglewood, where it's an entertainment venue and mixed use and all that. The plan has got to develop to include more than just that football stadium. This is just, I think, the first rendition. And you're right. It was done to try to get the attention of the National Football League, and I think they did a great job, but it's got to be more than that.
And I think at the end of the day, the Peacock Blitz team, because Stan wasn't responding to phone calls, they said they have to get something for him to respond to. And this is the first salvo to try to get him to respond.